What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Johnny Mac here. Just wanted to give you a heads up that if you are looking for a community that is open to discussion as far as mentorship, conservation, the wild, becoming a better person, and all of that, there is a group for you on Facebook, and it is called Soul Seekers. Soul Seekers, we are all about making ourselves a better person. We're all about making sure hunting lasts for generations to come and encouraging people to get plugged in. Whether you are someone who has something to give or someone who needs to soak it up like a sponge, this is a community for you, and I strongly encourage you that if you're on Facebook to join Soul Seekers, and if you're not on Facebook, hop on there just for that group. It is only going to be as powerful as we all make it. And so just remember that life happens for you, it doesn't happen to you, and that you can't outgive good. You can't outgive good, people. I want you to understand that, and I want you to believe it, because when we believe that and we lead with courage and we lead with intention, lives are changed, lives are transformed, just like on this podcast, transformation through primal adventure. Be blessed. Enjoy this episode. Talk soon. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mac. Through this podcast, I'm on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship as conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters, both new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by T&K Hunting Gear. If you haven't heard about T&K, then it's about time you do. I've been using T&K gear out in the field and on hunts and have fallen in love with their stuff. T&K is veteran-owned and 100% made in America using only American-made products. All their gear is covered under a lifetime warranty with no questions asked. If it breaks or fails, they will fix it or replace it for free. T&K is your resource for bino harnesses, bow slings, and a lot more amazing gear. For more information about T&K hunting gear, go to tnkhunting.com or search for them on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Freedom on, and stay soulful. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by the Crazy Elk Company. Based out of the state of Washington with products made in America, they are providing solutions with gear to problems you didn't even know you had. Their tag wallet is one of those solutions, and I had the pleasure of using it on all of my hunts this last year, and it is now a mainstay in my kill kit. The tag wallet is a water-resistant zippered pouch that comes with its own reusable zip ties to safely and securely store your notch tag for quick and easy access. For more information, go to crazyelkcompany.com and use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. Be blessed, everyone, and as always, stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Today, I got a really cool episode, as always, for all of you listeners out there, and that is with someone who I have made a connection with over the last month or so and come to really appreciate, enjoy, and admire, and that is Tim Endsley. And if you've never heard of the Rodeo Cowboy himself, Tim Endsley, we're going to be diving into this conversation, and we're going to talk about what it's like for him to journey and become a hunter, because Tim, his story is quite unique. He spent 27 years as a professional rodeo cowboy, and once he picked up hunting, specifically a bow, it was game over. He never looked back, and the rest is history. And you can catch him a lot on Badlands gear. He always is. He was hosting the Badlands live streaming event of the film festival this year, one of the co-hosts, and just an awesome individual and someone who has a powerful story. And I was like, this is the type of story the Soulful Hunter crowd wants to hear. So, Tim, thank you so much for being here tonight and joining us for an episode.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on, and appreciate the kind words. And yeah, definitely after watching your film, stories that you had on your film during the film definitely resonated with me. So yeah, I was glad we got to connect.
I love it. Yeah, mentorship as conservation is is it's the foundation in which why I even started everything. And so when you got to see our film Soul Seeker in the film fest, and then you and I talking about it after that, it was like, okay, there's a connection here. We got to explore this more, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the episode. So, Tim, give the listeners a little history on who you are, where you're from, and go from there.
Yeah, man. So I grew up in a rodeo family. My dad's actually a Hall of Fame cowboy. So, I mean, I was going to rodeos. I think there's a picture of me at a rodeo sitting on a world famous cowboy named Casey Tibbs sitting on his saddle bronc saddle when I was 1 year old, just behind the chutes at a rodeo. So that's all I knew my whole life was rodeo. I mean, that's all I knew. It's all I was interested in. I knew it was going to be my life. I knew it was going to be my livelihood. Um, I knew that from a very early age. And so even though I played other sports and stuff in school and was, a pretty good football player, pretty good baseball player, everything, but I always knew that rodeo was going to be first and foremost for me. And so I just branched, started rodeo and roping actually when I was 6. And I worked a lot of different events, growing up in junior rodeo, rode bulls, thought I was going to be a bull rider for a while, which I hated that. And then, roping calves came pretty natural to me. And so I just kind of stuck to that and, made a career out of it for, almost 30 years and traveled all over the United States and Canada and, made my living throwing a rope. And I loved every minute of it. When I kind of quit on my own terms, when I got ready to quit, it was, I knew it was time and I was ready. So then I had to find something else to occupy my brain.
Yeah, I totally get that.
So
Now, let me ask you this real quick. Every rodeo cowboy, sometimes they compete in different events, but they always have one that they really like to hang their hat on. What was it for you?
right. So calf roping was my main event. I worked a lot of different events growing up, but once I got kind of in high school and was kind of finding my way, I knew I was going to go into the pro rodeo world, pretty soon. I just pretty much concentrated on calf roping, which is, roping a calf and jumping off the horse and tying it down, and putting your hands up, and that's when the time stops. So I pretty much just that was my life. I mean, that was every day of my life was roping calves. It didn't. My life didn't vary towards anything else. So when I turned 18, it was by the time I was 18, that's pretty much what I did every day. That's all I did. I mean, I went to college on rodeo scholarships, and just rodeoed. That's all my life consisted of, and I knew that's what I was going to do and what I was going to be, and I just didn't deviate from the journey. And so yeah, roping calves was it, and I was kind of always there was probably, I think, any given time, 16 or 1,700 professional calf ropers that were going down the road. And I was always like a top 20, top 30 guy. So I was always, almost good enough to make the national finals, which the top 15 in the world always make the national finals. I was kind of almost good enough to make the to make the NFR, which is what we were all trying to do. I never made it there, but I did. I was fortunate enough that I was good enough. I didn't have to go get a job during all those years. I still made my living nodding my head and throwing a rope.
Yeah.
It's a pretty tough living, for the most part, because there's no guaranteed paychecks. You're just, you win, you're putting up your own money and you win what you win, and that's how you pay your truck payment. That's how you pay your house payment. That's how you pay your bills. And, it's pretty expensive, but, I mean, like I said, I was fortunate enough. I was at least good enough that I didn't have to get a job, a real job, a work job. So I got to do that. I worked my butt off at rodeo every day, but
That's cool.
But that was it.
That's awesome. It takes the whole statement. You got to earn it to a whole new level, because if you're not getting after it, you're literally not getting after it.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things I've always said. Especially since the social media world is, kind of grown into this huge thing. And so you can kind of make yourself out to be whatever you want to make yourself out to be on social media. But like in rodeo, you can make yourself out to be whatever you want. You can pull up in the, the most expensive truck and trailer and have the most expensive horses, and you can dress the part and look the part, but at the end of the day, you got to back up in that corner and nod your head, and the truth's going to come out. It doesn't matter. You can't fake it. No matter how good you look on social media and rodeo, you cannot fake it. When you nod your head, you either got it or you don't got it, and everybody there's going to know it in a matter of seconds.
Oh man,
So,
it's so cool.
that's one of the truest things about rodeo, and I think that's one of the things I love the most about rodeo is that you can't fake it. You can either do it or you can't, and you can't fake your way through it.
Yeah, you learn real quick whether or not you're going to be able to cut it.
Yeah, and it shows, so.
Yeah, the movie 8 Seconds and George Strait's Where the Sidewalk Ends and all that stuff, like the rodeo life, there's this. So here, a little backstory on me is I, in my heart and in my soul and in the calling of like what it means to be a man, I have this idea of the Western cowboy sitting high on his saddle, roaming the West, being self-reliant, full of courage, grit, determination, and making his way into life. And so for me, I've always wanted to be a cowboy, but it wasn't until 3 years ago that I actually rode a horse for the very first time. And it was like absolutely captivating. I was like, oh my, I could be a cowboy 100%. There's something about it that it's like hunting. It is a way of life. It's not something you just kind of pick up on the weekends and you go do. It's easy to just jump right in and be fully immersed.
Yeah, and I think that's some of the things that I really enjoyed about growing up being a cowboy, was just the values that cowboys tended to have. The things you grew up knowing. The cowboy code was, you lived by kind of an ethics code. We were obviously in the area I grew up in, and the Alvarez rodeo in. All the guys now, they all want to be athletes, and we just all want to be cowboys. Like, we didn't care about the title of athlete. We were doing all the wild, crazy cowboy stuff. That's what we were living the life that, of the wild, crazy cowboys. And we weren't really interested in being called athletes. It was way more cool to me to be known as a cowboy than it would have been to be known as an athlete. Even though what cowboys do is so athletic. It's probably one of the most physical, athletic things of any sport in the world, and it's something you have to work on every day. And the fact that you don't win, you don't get paid unless you win. Which that gives it another added factor of why you work so hard at it. And so yeah, but still, just the fact that you never left anybody hanging. You were always there for whether they were your buddies or whether they weren't your buddies. You just didn't leave anybody hanging. If they were broke down on the side of the road, you stopped and helped them no matter what. If they were, if they showed up at a rodeo and their horse came up lame and they couldn't ride him, you let them borrow yours. It was that was just the cowboy code. We just all kind of took care of each other. Even if you didn't like a guy, maybe you weren't going to leave him hanging. And I think that's kind of how one of the best things about growing up as a cowboy, I think that I kind of always try to carry with me is that code of ethics. And I don't know if I don't really know how to explain it. It's just kind of there, right? I guess there's not really a lot of gray area. It's either right or wrong, and you just kind of and a lot of times you push those boundaries when you're doing that wild cowboy stuff that you're probably not supposed to be doing, and you sure don't want your kids to learn about. But
yeah. Well, either you're on the horse or you're not, right? So
yeah, exactly.
It's pretty black and white, like you said, and I love that. So one of the things that I am a true believer in is that adversity and competition breeds success, right?
Sure.
And so when we have the courage to put ourselves in situations that are extremely humbling, humbling, it teaches you, it reveals who you really are and what you're made of. And I think my journey, actually not just I think, I know my journey of learning how to hunt and become a hunter has been some of my adversity. That is why I've created the Soulful Hunters because I've really been able to open up through the adversity of learning how to hunt and trying new things and realizing that if I'm going to be any good at this, I actually have to work at it because without any risk, there's no reward. So, what things did you learn about yourself from rodeoing that you have now applied to your hunting life? And how has that helped you in your perseverance, whether it's in a tree stand or on a hunt or however, whatever it is?
I think mostly it's that even though I take it really seriously, I, I don't let the I don't let the failures, override this, the good parts of it. Where even in rodeo, you had to have a short memory. So, you know, when you're rodeoing for a living, you're basically going to a rodeo pretty much during the summer. You're every day of the week and you're traveling. And I mean, you're just constantly on the road. You're not getting to really practice a lot. You're just constantly competing. And so, you're going to have some bad nights. You're not going to win every night, So you have to have a short memory. So, you learn how to deal with that. You kind of go through that checklist of, okay, what could I have done here that was different? And I never fell into that category. The one thing I always hated was I hated anybody to make excuses. 9 times out of 10, if you didn't win something in a rodeo, you could say, if you sat and thought about it after it was over with, you could think of 5 different places you could have improved on that run that would have allowed you to win. So you really can't blame it on anybody
Yeah.
but yourself. And
Very, it's a
so,
very reflective activity.
yeah. So I think that's one of the things that I brought into hunting with me was that short memory is, early on, I didn't get disappointed, in hunts. I still don't get disappointed in hunts. I don't, if I go hunt for 5 or 6 days and it ends up not being a successful hunt, I always find successes out of it. I mean, whether it was, okay, I learned something, all the different things I learned on this hunt, whether it was 8 days in northwest Nebraska and we never found one shooter mule deer buck the whole time we were there. And we were in snow the whole time and hiking, 6 and 8 miles a day for a bunch of Oklahoma and Arkansas guys. That was a lot. And especially a bunch of whitetail dudes. And but when we got done, I mean, the cool thing about it was we're all rodeo guys. Every one of us that were on that hunt were all rodeo guys. And we were all sitting around camp, talking about, we hated the fact that we really didn't get on anything, but no one was disappointed. It was like, hey, it is what it is. And we learned from the experience. We had a great time, and we're gonna definitely do it again.
You still got to ride.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole thing. Is I just don't think you can let the highs get too high. Those get too. You gotta kind of got to ride the wins when you're winning, and you gotta ride the lows when you're not winning. And the way I look at that is, what can I take from this? What did I learn from this that I can carry on to the next time I come to this place, or the next time I'm in this same situation? What did I learn from it? One of the things I learned from the 8-day hunt we spent in Nebraska this year, all of us together, was we spent way too much time jumping around different places because we weren't finding deer immediately. So we started jumping around kind of in panic mode for a few days. And then, and at the end of it, we all kind of thought, man, we should have just really hammered on this one spot till we found, what we were looking for.
Yeah.
And we didn't. And, so I think you're just always learning. And I think that's some of the stuff that I brought from rodeo. You're never going to perfect any event in rodeo. Not one person has ever made a perfect run. Not one person has ever made a perfect ride. It doesn't exist. And so you're constantly learning. And so I think that's the same thing I brought into hunting. And that's the reason I was pretty much drawn to bow hunting more than I was anything else, because it's such an imperfect, act. That you have to work on all the time, and you can work on it all the time. And it's, in a lot of ways, it's just going out and shooting your bow is just the best way to clear your head. Like if you've got 9,000 other things going on in the world, you you can't be thinking about those 9,000 other things while you're trying to look through that peep sight or while you're trying to shoot a trad bow or anything. You've got to concentrate on that shot. So you clear your mind and you work on it. Same thing in rodeo. It's when I backed up in the corner, I was just thinking solely on what my purpose was at that moment, what the first thing I had to do. And I was just so focused on that first act that the rest of it just happened naturally. And same thing with hunting for me. It's like, you get so focused on that first act, and then, you just kind of let the chips fall where they fall. And you roll with it.
I love that. Yeah. Archery is so special. Like for example, at my house, I don't have the ability to shoot in my yard. So I actually shoot at 4 to 5 yards in my garage, like daily. And I'm using the word "but" here because a lot of people are like, "Oh man, well, it comes season time, I'll get out and shoot and whatever." For me, I'm 4 to 5 yards, 3 to 4 arrows a day. Like that's all I'm really shooting, as long as I'm just consistently holding my target, aiming at a small little piece of painter's tape on my block target. And then this last year, I didn't go archery hunting until November. And so I was like, okay, I know my stuff is dialed in. I went out one day before the hunt, shot out to 70 yards, got my distances, felt comfortable because I already had the muscle memory. And then turns out that the shot that I took on my elk was at a 70-yard shot. And I was able to smoke it. And I was like, perfect. This is because it's the small things, right? It's that it's that 5-yard shot. The consistency in that is no different from 4 to 5 yards to 70 yards to 100 yards, whatever it is that you want to do. But you start small and you start with a solid foundation, and it can take you to the moon.
And that's the same thing with rodeo. That's exactly how we were with rodeo. It was with rope and calves. It was, the way we practiced was we weren't practicing to be super fast when we were in a practice pen. We weren't practicing, making those fast rodeo runs every time we roped in the practice pen. And when we were home practicing, we were practicing to make no mistakes. And the way I basically looked at it was, your adrenaline is about 4 times higher when you're competing than it is when you're in a practice pen. Yeah. So that means if my muscle memory is down so packed, so solid that I'm not going to make any mistakes, then that adrenaline's actually going to speed me up whether I want to or not.
Yep.
So it's the same thing with hunting. I think it's the same thing with archery for me. Is I go out and I try to make those shots and make them as repetitious as I can, so that whether and I've got a range behind my house. I've got like 17 targets. I can stand in one spot. I can shoot out to 100 yards, and I have guys that they go, "Oh man, you're practicing out to 100 yards, so you're going to, that doesn't seem cool that you're going to shoot something at 100 yards." I'm not really. I don't plan on shooting anything at 100 yards. I really don't. But it's just another way to make those closer shots seem a little steadier to me. And like you said, it's the same shot. I shoot a single pin sight, and so for me, it's no different. The shooting a 20-yard shot's no different shooting a 70-yard shot. You just put the pin in the middle and
let it rip.
As long as your form's good, you let it rip. You know, I mean, and if you're off one way or another, then it's because your form's off. It's not because because it's a single pin. It's no different. You're putting that same pin on that same spot every time, so it makes no sense. And so that's why I try to. I do the same thing that I did with rodeo. I just try to make myself as consistent as I can, putting them in. And I'm not trying to hit a dot. I'm trying to, as long as I'm shooting groups that I'm happy with, and they're all, they're all kind of in the same area. Obviously, closer to the target is, the better groups I'm going to shoot. But, if I shoot out to 70 and I shoot a group, like that, I'm, obviously you can't see me, but if I shoot, a 5 or 6 inch group, at 70 yards, I'm like, oh man, I'm stoked. Every one of those is in the kill. That's all I'm worried about. I'm not shooting for points, man. I'm shooting for,
you're shooting for me.
I'm shooting for an end result,
That's right.
And so long as, and I look at it this way too, with deer, any big game, and mostly deer for me, especially whitetail deer, is I've got about a 12-inch area that I'm trying to get that arrow in, and so long as I'm consistently hit inside that 12-inch area, that's all I'm worried about.
That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. All right, so let's give the listeners like what I think is one of the really cool stories about your hunting background is how you actually transitioned from rodeo cowboy to hunting. And what age was it that when you actually went on this hunt?
I was 20. I guess I was 25. I guess I was 25 when I went on the first hunt. I was actually dating my wife at the time, and her whole family hunts. I mean, like, uh, I moved to Arkansas from Texas, and here in Arkansas, like they used to let the schools out for like the first week of rifle season. Like the whole school, all the schools would be closed for the first week. It was like a holiday because there wasn't going to be anybody there because they were all at deer camp. And so my wife's family has this deer camp that they've had. I made a film about it. It was in the film festivals a few years ago. Uh, I think this is year 60 that they've hunted in this one particular camp. And her whole family hunted there at one time. There was like 20 of them. I mean, they had Thanksgiving there, and they all camped for the whole first week of rifle season or whatever. And well, they all hunted. I mean, like they just couldn't wait. And like I just didn't understand what the big deal was about it. Like I mean, they were like, chomping at the bits about deer season, and I'm like, I just don't get it. I mean, I got rodeos to go to, and I'm just not real concerned about it. And so I went with my now father-in-law and watched him and his brother and his dad and all them sight in their rifles, and I mean they were shooting dead center of a pie plate, at 100 yards, just smoking the center out of this pie plate at 100 yards, and he was like, "You want to shoot?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not interested really." And so I just started they were talking about it, and I'm like, "I don't see the deal." I said, like, if a deer comes out and you guys are sitting in these big stands, and it's like there's no way the deer's got a chance because you're going to smoke him with his rifle, before he's never going to know you're even there. So it just doesn't seem that appealing to me. And so they finally talked me into going, and they put me in a box stand over a wheat field, and there's a little history that goes with that. But needless to say, my first hunt, like I definitely smoked everything I shot at, uh, uh, and like when they all came out, they were like, "Man, did you ever hit what you was shooting at?" And I'm like, "I hit everything I was shooting at." And they're like, "What? You shot like 5 times?" And I'm like, "Yeah." and anyway, and I headed them the rifle back, and I'm like, it just didn't turn me on. And I'm not against rifle hunting. I mean, my wife rifle hunts, and I go with her, and it just that particular thing just didn't turn me on. Like it was that was just a part, something about that. Just, it wasn't that I felt bad about it or anything else. It was like, I mean, I could just walk out here and grab this rifle and shoot this deer, and I'll be done. It's over. So it was over too quick for me.
So can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah.
Because this is one of the questions that, as a newer adult onset hunter who's a Western hunter,
Right.
And the motto of this podcast is transforming lives through primal adventure, and the idea that we go out into the wilderness to find ourselves, to seek after these animals, and to my first animal I shot was 9 miles deep into the heart of the Cascade Mountains here in the state of Washington. I backpacked a long ways in to come across an animal that I could shoot, and then I had to carry it all the way back out. That was a butt kicker. It taught me a lot about myself. I don't have a perspective when it comes to whitetail Eastern style hunting, where you go to the same piece of land year after year, and you just kind of wait for something to walk out. You pop it, and maybe that's why most whitetail hunters, I'm speaking out of my level and expert zone, so please jump in if you need to. But I think that's probably why a lot of whitetail hunters archery hunt rather than rifle hunt. But I also, where does the adventure lie? And that's one of the things that I am constantly searching for and trying to understand.
That's kind of where it was with me. It was like, and for like my father-in-law, like and all the people that he grew up with and his dad and all them, it was, I mean, it was just they shot deer just to put food on the table. I mean, that was the whole deal. I mean, they shot deer to fill their freezers, and that was it. And you all, everybody went hunting, and it was a matter of getting in a stand and shooting deer to fill your freezer, and that was it. It was a necessity of life for my father-in-law growing up and his dad, because I mean, they didn't grow up with money, and you filled your freezer with wild game, and that's what you ate, because you weren't going to go to the store and buy steak, because it was
Yeah. And that
so
makes
you had
sense to me. That's like
yeah.
something I forget. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, people who don't have the ability to go out and buy stuff, they have to rely on what they're shooting.
Exactly, and that's kind of where that came in with them, and I get it. I mean, after a while, I understood the whole scenario of why they all enjoy rifle hunting. So much is because it is about filling that freezer, and about for years that's how they fed their family. And two, when he was growing up, you just didn't see a lot of deer. I mean, just seeing if you went out and saw one or two deer in a day, it was a big deal. And now, I mean, where we hunt, you'll see, we may see 40 or 50 deer in a day, or more. And so now, you're more particular about what you shoot, even with a rifle, because you're going to have that opportunity to fill the freezer no matter what. But back then, you just like, the old saying, if it's brown, it's down. I mean, it was for real. If it was brown, it was down. I mean, they shot it because you didn't let one go.
Yeah.
And there was no such thing as shooting something, for age class. It was just, you shot deer, and I mean, they had skinning racks there, and everybody came in, they skinned deer, and the whole camp shared in the meat, and it was, that's what it was for. But when I started hunting, like I said, the rifle deal didn't do anything for me, so it was probably a full year before I even considered hunting again, and it was with a guy I was rodeoing with that actually loved to bow hunt, and so he started carrying his bow with us when we were on the road traveling, and he was shooting a target out. I was laying in the trailer, playing PlayStation on the TV, and he was outside shooting his bow, and so we came back to my house where we were staying for a couple of days before we left on another trip, and he had something wrong with his bow, and I found an archery shop that was close here, and he said, I got to go fix my bow. So we went to the archery shop, and I literally sat there in a chair and watched some VHS tapes from the very first Drury videos, very first Drury outdoors, like, back when they were still shooting 120-inch deer and thought they were shooting giants, and they were teaching you how to hunt. I mean, I remember them talking about, why they hung their tree stand in a specific spot, how hard they had hunted this spot, how they worked the wind, how they, patterned these deer and did this and did that. And I thought, this is kind of cool. And then watching them actually, shoot a deer with a bow, and it had to get in close, and they had to be really still and quiet, and just, the preparation that I felt like it took, it was more like a chess game for me. So it was a little bit more like rodeo for me. It was like, you have to work at this, or you're not going to be successful at all. And so I literally bought a bow that day and set it up that day, and then from that point on, man, I was ate up with it. Like, that's all I wanted to do. I mean, I was shooting a bow every day, and studying everything I could study about white-tailed deer. I was buying books just specifically about white-tailed deer, not about hunting them, just about the deer themselves. And I was buying every video I could buy. I was subscribed to every bow hunting magazine, and I was just going through everything, every bit of information I could find, trying to learn, because all the people around me were all rifle hunters, and they just really didn't know anything about bow hunting. And so it was just up to me to kind of learn on my own.
And do you think you fell in love with it more because you learned it on your own? Like, there's that certain gratitude where you're like, okay, this is mine. I own this because no one else has influenced me other than my own education and the drive to get me to where I'm at.
I think so. I think there's a lot to that. I mean, it was, and I equate a lot of things back to rodeo, because it's, rodeo is such a singular, sport. It's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're going to win, it's up to you. If you're going to lose, it's up to you. So I'm kind of the same way with bow hunting. I felt like, you know, if I was going to be successful as a bow hunter, it was going to be totally up to me, and I had to do the work, and I had to, you know, try to figure this whole puzzle out. And every year it's a whole new puzzle, and that's what was so cool to me, was that every hunt's a whole new puzzle. And uh, so yeah, so that first year I just studied my butt off, and I didn't really have anywhere to hunt. And another friend of mine that rodeoed, they had some land down on the river, and they all just kind of rifle hunt during rifle season. And he said, "Yeah, man, you can come out here and bow hunt if you want to." And I went and my own stand, and right off the bat, hung a stand in a spot that, I mean, it was like everything I'd read in the book was, there was, you know, there was bedding area, there was food, there was transition areas. It was like everything I'd read in every magazine and every video was like, I found the spot that everyone says is the spot. And there were some fresh scrapes on the ground because it was, you know, late October. And I thought, this is it. So hung a stand, waited like 2 days till the wind got right. I went in there and got in that stand, and you know, blew a grunt call for the first time I'd ever blown a grunt call late that afternoon, just before dark, and a nice 8-point walked out and worked the scrape 30 yards in front of me, and I put one through him, and he crashed right in front of me, and I was like, holy crap, that just happened. Like, that just really happened. Like, that just happened. And turned out to be a Pope and Young buck. You know, I mean, turned out to be 126-inch 8-point. And what was so crazy was, like, I everything I'd read was stay in your stand, you know, and give him 30 or 40 minutes, you know, before you get down. And like, I really needed a seatbelt because I was wanting out of that stand so bad to go see, because I watched him crash in the woods and I knew he was down, but I was like, no, you're supposed to stay up here for this long, so I'm going to do it, you know. And I think I stayed about 20 minutes, and I got down, and then I was terrified of the deer while he was laying there on the ground.
Right.
You know, all these other stories, I'm jumping up, running off, or running over you. And so, like, I'm easing up with a stick, you know, poking a stick at this deer. And then when I realized he was down, I just, the emotions that came over me were just, I couldn't believe it. Like, it was just, and I think the thing that came over me the most was, and I've never lost this. I think this is the reason why I've never lost this feeling. It's still there today. I remember thinking how important it was to me to realize that I'd just taken something's life. Like, it was breathing a few minutes ago. Now it's not breathing. And it was because I made it not breathe. And I wanted to make sure I realized the importance of that. Like, it wasn't just, you know, killing something. It was that, you know, this was a living, breathing animal, and I just took its life. And I wanted to make sure that I knew how important that was, and it was important to me. It's still important to me today. Every time I put an arrow through one, there's that moment of, and then there's that moment of, man, you know,
Yeah.
what a spectacular, you know, animal that I just, you know, I was fortunate enough to do this.
Can I speak to that a little bit right now? So,
Sure.
my first animal that I shot was a black bear. I was
Right.
freaked out. It's scared to death. Scared to death of bears in the woods. I'm
Right.
actually writing an article right now for a magazine about transitioning from backpacker to bear hunter, backcountry bear
Right.
hunting. And so I remember, like, laying in my tent at night with a rifle, wanting to kill a bear because that's what I was out there to do, and being
Mm-hmm.
scared to death that a bear was going to come into camp at night.
Yeah.
And so when I shot this bear, I shot it at 30 yards, and I made eye contact with it, and I locked eyes, and I could, like, for a moment, time froze, and I saw that this bear was more afraid of me than I was of it. And so I shot, and I heard it death moan, and it died right in front of me. I was scared to death to walk up, and when I touched it, I was like, there's like an energy transfer, like bam. And if I have a spirit animal, it is a black bear, 100%.
Right.
But going on with the reverence of the animal is that right next to me, I have my very first shoulder mount animal. It's my very
All right.
first antlered animal that I shot, and my very first animal I shot with a bow, and it's this beautiful Roosevelt elk.
Yeah, I
I'm
saw
gonna,
that on your
yeah, I
Instagram.
posted
Yeah.
that. I haven't mounted it
Yep.
on the wall, but you know, I've never really been into shoulder mounts. Being
Yeah.
newer hunter, I love looking at them, but I'm like, oh man, I don't think that's ever me. Now that I have this here in my office, I find myself just putting my hand on it and just
Yeah.
reconnecting with it. Like, even though the eyes are not real in this mount, I'm looking in its eyes and I'm just admiring the beauty and the grandeur of what these animals, these creatures are, and what they do for our life, the circle of life,
Yeah.
right? Through
Yeah.
death brings life.
Yep.
And yet, in I think Mayan culture, you die 3 times.
Yeah. Right.
The first time you die is when you realize you're mortal and you're
Right.
gonna die at
Right.
some point. The second death is when you actually physically die, but the third time is when your name is no longer spoken.
Right.
And I feel like what an honor it is for this animal that I've been able to save its antlers, its hide, and to recreate it now for me to be able to relive that hunt
Yeah.
moment
Absolutely.
after moment. And there's a lot of things that people just don't understand until you're in that experience. Hunting
That's
is
right.
so experiential, right? Like
Yeah.
you can be like, "Oh, I'm anti-hunting," or "I don't like rifle hunting," or "I don't like white-tailed deer stand like
Yeah.
box blind hunting." But the moment you put yourself in that and you really experience it is when your life is truly transformed. And it
Absolutely.
and it lives with you forever. Like I haven't killed that many animals, but I can tell you about every single shot I've ever taken on one.
Yeah, and that's me. I mean, right here, I'm in my office and it's dark in here right now, but on the wall of my office are my 5 biggest bucks that I ever killed. They're a couple from public land, a couple from my lease in Missouri or in Kansas. And I can remember everything about every one of those deer. And uh, one of them, it took me 3 years before I finally ever got a chance to get an arrow in him. And I mean, I look at them all the time up there, and I just remember, how much video footage I've got of this deer, um, and and it was kind of sad for me the day that I finally got an arrow through him, because it was like, the chase is over, and that's kind of how it's always been for me with with bow hunting. Is it's like the second that arrow is released and it goes through that animal, it's like that's like hitting the 3-pointer at the buzzer. I mean, the game's over at that point. So there's always a little bit of sadness there for me, especially if it's an animal I've been trying to, like him. Like I had 3 years of trying to get next to this deer and I couldn't. and and then finally he just shows up out of nowhere, and it's like not even expecting him. Wasn't even. It was just one of those deals. And so I guess, yeah, there's, for me, um, I can remember everything about every one of those hunts. And so when I look at those mounts on the wall, and after the last buck I mounted was my biggest buck, and I killed him in Kansas. First day in the stand, opening day, didn't have one picture of him on a trail camera, didn't even know he existed, and he just showed up. And literally my hunt was over first day of Kansas bow season, and it was fine, because it was like, I mean, I'm not gonna pass, a giant mature deer waiting on something else, and I didn't know he was going to be my biggest buck ever. It didn't matter to me. He was a big giant mature buck, and that's what I was there to hunt. And the first one that came by he came by that day. And so
You,
literally the entire footage of that deer is all the footage I have on that deer, and I'm looking at him right now. Is all the footage I have on that deer is literally like less than 2 minutes from the time that I see him to the time that he crashes, and there's less than 2 minutes of. So
that's all you knew of them.
that's it.
It's really funny what you just said gave me a mental image of my 20s. And this idea, because there's so many people do not understand the concept of passing on an animal
Yeah.
or waiting for a more mature animal or the right animal, and then you have this concept of like, well, are you hunting just for meat or
Yeah.
whatever. The mental picture that I got and it made me giggle, and listeners, you might actually laugh at this. It made me think about when you're dating. You don't
Yeah.
you're out there looking for chicks, looking for the one, whatever it is. And that, do you just pass on one because, oh, that's like not a big enough rack? No pun intended, or pun intended, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I
Right.
was like, oh no, there's a more mature one out there for me. Or,
Yeah,
at
exactly.
the end of the day, when you send it, whether it's in your day-to-day life, your job, your career, your extracurricular activities, your family, or in hunting, you don't get redos. So
No.
be confident in what you're doing and also be grounded in what you want.
Yeah.
And know that when you send it, enjoy the process.
Exactly. And that's the one thing I tell everybody is, once that arrow's gone from your bow, it's gone and you can't bring it back. So, especially as bow hunters, and everybody's getting, and one of the things that's really, big in the outdoor industry now is, and as outdoor producers, we've kind of all brought it on ourselves is, you got, especially in the Midwest, you got, these hit lists on these bucks. They're running trail cameras all year and they've got 7 deer on their hit list, and every one of them's named Bob or Jeff or, or Todd or something, and like I've never named a deer in my life. Like I'm not interested in it. I rarely even look at my trail cameras. Rarely look at my trail cameras because my whole thing now with my bow is that I want to make sure that I take a fully mature buck, and on the properties that I hunt, where we have the farm in Kansas that me and some rodeo buddies lease, and we don't manage it. We don't go out there, and we're not raising deer. There's plenty of deer there. We just, whatever, you got one tag in Kansas. You get one tag.
Yeah.
So when you turn the arrow loose, that's it. That's your one tag. It's done. So be happy with whatever you shoot, and it doesn't matter. I don't care. I kind of started the lease, and I tell everybody, listen, I don't care what you shoot. If you shoot a 2.5-year-old 8 point that's 100 inches and you're, jumping up down doing cartwheels over it, I'm doing cartwheels with you, dude. I'm happy for you. That's whatever. We're hunting, and if it makes you happy, I'm happy for you. I don't care. I'm not going to come up and shame you because it was too little, because I don't care.
Yeah.
It's, for me, my whole goal when I go to our Kansas farm is, I know what's there, and I know we have a lot of mature deer, and so I'm just going to wait on a fully mature deer and let the younger ones grow up.
You bring a
And
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, is that so often, especially with social media,
oh
people
yeah,
don't hunt their own hunts. You
no,
you hunt, well, and I don't use the word should very often, but I'm going to use the word need here. You need to hunt your hunt.
exactly,
Period. It
yeah,
needs to be your hunt. It is not a measuring contest. It is
no,
not a manly, ego driven contest. My first deer that I shot was a doe, but my first buck that I shot was a spike.
yeah,
And that night, so I shot this spike, and that night I hosted a community event in this small town in eastern Washington for any hunters out. It was like a late season hunt, so anyone who was still trying to fill tags was over there, and we had a good amount of people to show up from all over the state. And I was sharing the story about my spike, and there's some people that are like, "Oh, it's just a spike." The word "just,"
right,
it's just a
yeah,
spike. It's just a spike. It's like, dude, that spike was the world to me.
yeah,
The
absolutely,
absolute world to me. And I'm not shoulder mounting it, because like I said, I wasn't really that big into shoulder mounts until I got this elk
hmm,
back. But oh baby, I already got a spot on the wall for that euro, and I'm ready to, like, that
yeah,
story needs to be told.
absolutely,
And it's lost within culture at times. It
big time,
and it's not just the hunting world, it's society as a whole. loves to judge, loves
Yeah,
to. I always talk about Teddy Roosevelt's "The Man in the Arena" quote, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Oh, dude, that gets me every time. People love to point how the strong man stumbles and falls,
that's
and
exactly right.
and in the Bible it talks about, stop worrying about the splinter in someone else's eye when you got this giant log in your own. It's a life issue. It's not a hunting issue.
Yeah, and the same thing is just like if we're, I do a lot of work with the Arkansas Game and Fish, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is the fact that over the last like 7 years, we dropped like almost 160,000 people did not buy license in Arkansas to hunt.
Wow.
And Arkansas is like a huge hunter state. I mean, everybody hunts here, and now it's dropped off. And so one of the constant things that we talk about is how to get more people involved in hunting and bring more people through, because just like we have archery in the schools here. I don't know if you guys have archery in the schools out west. We have archery in the schools here. And I mean, it's a big deal, but like only about 20% of the kids that are in archery in the schools actually ever hunt.
Yeah.
you
I,
know
I
and so we're trying to figure out ways that the biggest thing in Arkansas is that either you're a member of a deer club or you own your own property. There's or you hunt public land, which is basically bow hunting only. And we have 3.1 million acres of public land here in Arkansas that's available for hunting, and but almost all of it's archery only. uh, but in order, like if you want to rifle hunt or you want to bring a kid up hunting or whatever, you got to be a member of a deer club, and or you've got to own your own property. So we're trying to find other ways to get people involved in hunting, and get kids, either whether we get them out fishing or whether we get them out, squirrel hunting or whatever, because you can squirrel hunt on public lands here with a gun. Just anything we can do to get them interested in hunting in general. Whether doesn't mean we're taking them deer hunting. It means we're trying to get them out into the outdoors and teach them how to hunt. And I think that just helps build, bring the culture back, because of some of the deer clubs and stuff. It's a good situation, a bad situation, because people, some of them have 300 members, and they've got 5,000-6,000 acres, so that gives each member one stand, and that's the only place they can go. That's their spot, and they pay $700 or $800 a year or 1,000 to be a member, and they get to go to that one stand, and then now some of these camps start putting all these antler restrictions on them. You can't shoot anything unless it's this big, because we want to make because everybody here wants to shoot a giant buck, and they're not going to shoot a giant buck, most of them, because they're going to shoot the first thing that's got horns that walks out. But it's they start putting all these restrictions on them in these camps about what you can shoot, what you can't shoot. And then you got a kid sitting up there the whole time you're trying to, have him enjoy hunting. And then you're telling him everything that comes out, we're not going to shoot that.
right. Oh, there's a deer. Yeah, you can't shoot that. Oh, there's a deer.
Then you got to explain to him why, and it's like, so yeah, there's just I think there's a lot of different things that are causing, the number of hunters nationwide to drop. It's not just in Arkansas. It's just a nationwide thing. And a lot of it has to do with social media and, people getting shamed on there for shooting something that's too small, or shooting a doe, or, whatever. It's, I'm always happy for anybody, no matter what.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy that they're out there doing it.
Using the hashtag "make doe hunting great again."
Yeah, exactly. There was a buddy of mine that was going to start a whole YouTube channel and nothing but killing does all across the country.
Yeah.
He was just going to go all over the United States and just shoot does. And that was it. He's like, that's all I want to do. Just shoot does.
That's awesome. So I actually just 2 years ago brought archery into my school. So I'm a middle school phys ed and health teacher in my day job. Right. And it's really interesting. Like, I was also only into hunting at 4 years at this point. And
Right.
so my my foundation or my knowledge base of talking points, I didn't feel confident in where I was. Right now
Right.
it's a different ball game. However, with that being said, I'm teaching archery and I'm still not talking to the kids about hunting. And here I
Right.
am, I'm all about hunter recruitment and mentorship.
Right. Right.
And so this gets to change. And one of the things is like education as a whole. The NEA, National Education Association here in the state of Washington, the Washington Education Association, is more of a, and people, I've got some grief on this before when I talk politics on this podcast, but it is what it is, that
Right.
it's more of a liberally mindset, like anti-guns, anti-Second Amendment, anti-hunting. You have Bill Gates that's buying up all this ranch land and pushing on
Hmm.
people that everyone needs to start eating artificial meat.
Artificial meat.
And
Yeah.
he's also the biggest stakeholder in Beyond Meat industry. And
Right.
so I'm like, man, but here, what a cool opportunity. I found myself as a man, as a husband. Well, you've seen the video. Like my video,
Yeah.
Soul
Exactly.
Seeker, is how powerful hunting was for me. And people are so quick to judge what they don't know. I had an
Yeah.
eighth grade history teacher. He told me, I used the word, oh, that's weird. He's like, why are you saying it's weird? Because it's not normal to you? And I was like, okay, that's a good point.
Exactly.
We're
Yeah.
so quick to say, well, if it's not within our typical everyday 9 to 5 or whatever it is, then it's quote unquote weird or not normal or should be shunned. Open minds, man.
See,
Perspective is so much more important than an opinion.
it's exactly what I said to my father-in-law when they were trying to get me to go hunting when I was, 25 years old. I'm like, this is just too weird. Like, I'm just not into it. And, like, I don't get it. And then even after they took me, I still kind of didn't get it. And then, when I discovered archery, all of a sudden I got it. That spoke to me, that resonated to me. Um, and that's what got me to want to go, find out about hunting. And I honestly didn't know how I would feel after I shot my first animal. I'd never killed anything in my life, and I didn't know how I was going to feel. I didn't know how I was going to feel, but it was the total amount of emotions that I felt at 26 years old. Where most of these people I knew had been hunting their whole life. And if they were hunters, they'd been hunting pretty much their whole life. And um, so me having that experience at 26, I think was a lot different than my experience would have been at 10.
Yeah.
And I think because at 10 you don't necessarily realize the magnitude of what you've just done, and at 26 you realize the magnitude of what you've just done, and you respect it a lot more. And I think that's where I am now. Is this still to this day? I respect it so much, and I mean, that's one of the other reasons I love to bow hunt, especially tree stand hunting or whitetail hunting, is you just get to watch so many deer, and even if you're not, the deer you're wanting to shoot or one you're going to shoot isn't there, you're just watching deer. I mean, you're watching. In my place in Kansas, I mean, to set over a bean field and watch 30 or 40 deer in one field and just watch them be deer, and
It's special.
it's just, yeah, there's something about it. And and like hunting in Nebraska on public land, and having badgers and stuff come up behind us, and I've never seen a badger before, and there's all of a sudden there's a badger coming up behind me. I'm like, what is this thing? Where did it come from? And just the stuff that I've experienced in the woods. And then getting to go hunt, in the backcountry for the first time with Jason Matzinger, was the first person that ever took me in the backcountry, and just getting to go, and the fact that Jason was one of those guys that, because I was a dude from Arkansas and I knew nothing about, hunting the Missouri breaks in Montana, and but it was just me and him, and we got snowed in. So that was my first experience. We're in a wall tent. We're 30 miles from the nearest road. We're 100 miles from the nearest gas station, and we're snowed in with no communication, no cell phones, no nothing. We can't talk to anybody. And so for 3 days, my wife didn't even know if I was alive or dead because we had no way to get cell signal. And and having a mountain lion kill a mule deer literally less than 100 yards outside our tent one night. And it was like, I just got to experience so many things. And Jason was so good at teaching me, like showing me. And, and I think that's one of the things is, when we do go out and we take new people, that are wanting to learn, you got to understand they're trying to learn, and you're there to help them learn, and help them learn, what you consider to be the way you do it, and whether it's right or wrong. And I try to, like I said, I try to be as ethical a person as I can, and I try to teach them, this is why I hunt, this is why I'm out here, this is why I hang the stands where I do, this is why I do this, and I try to show them everything, everything I know, because I didn't have that opportunity. But I did the same thing with rodeo. I mean, I felt like every kid that came up, kids' dads would come up and go, "Hey, is there any way my kid could just come rope with you for a week?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely," because I felt like, somebody taught me all this stuff about rodeo. So it's my job to pass it on so that it keeps going.
Absolutely.
And I think so many people don't look at it that way. They look at it as, I'm going to protect this that's mine.
Yep.
And it's mine.
Yeah.
And it's not anybody else's. And if anyone comes into my spot on public land, I'm going to get mad and I'm going to throw a fit. And if anybody, anybody from out of state parks their truck in the, at the trailhead, and this is where I've been hunting my whole life, and I'm going to be mad and I'm going to throw a fit. And you can't be that way. It's especially on public land. That's one of the things. I mean, I take a ton of people I hunt public land here in Arkansas almost extensively. And, I still have our deer camp, but I love public land. It's kind of my thing. And it's because it's such a challenge.
Yeah.
And even taking people to public land, I'm not bashful taking people to my best spots. I'll be like, here you go. I got to have a lot of trust in you before I'm going to take you to my best spots, but when I have people come in, especially from out of state, come down and hunt with me, I take them to my best spots and put them in it. And I want them to have that same experience that I have,
totally.
And
I was always raised that if you truly love something, then release it. And if it's meant to be, it's going to come back to you. Right?
Yeah. Right.
That is how I feel about hunting, and also how I feel like I wish other people would grasp that concept, right?
Yeah.
The tighter you hold on to something, like my 4-year-old, bless his heart. We have I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1.5-year-old. Well, my middle son, Cannon, he is just captivated by our little youngest son, and all he wants to do is squeeze him and hug him and touch him and kiss him and all this. And my littlest is like, like, get off of me.
Right.
The more you want to grip onto something and hold it and take ownership of it, the more it's going to leave you. The more it's going to fight you and resist. The minute you let go because you really want it to last and you want others to experience it, this is why I truly believe, and I stand upon the statement that you can't outgive good. The circle of life, whether it's like the yin and yang or karma or whatever it is, like, you put it out into the universe. What you put out into the universe is what you're going to get back. And if you're putting good out there, it's going to boomerang right back. Maybe not in the time that you expect it to, because the expectations, you got to throw those out the window.
Right.
You do it because it's the right thing to do. So,
and we talked about this a little bit in one of our other conversations is about, there's several different ways to be a conservationist, and, there's the typical way that everyone considers conservation to be, which is, protecting lands or protecting animals or protecting this and that and the other. But the probably the most important way to be a conservationist is to bring more people into hunting, because the more people that are into hunting, the more people that are going to be there to protect hunting. And I don't know if you can hear that cop car going by my window.
I can. Yeah.
He's literally like 60 yards on the road out there. Yeah. So, to me, it's always been important to introduce other people, or to even help other people that are, maybe I've got buddies that, they've only ever hunted at deer camps. They've only ever had that experience. And now all of a sudden they're wanting to get into archery hunting. And, they're not really sure how, man, I take them. I'll take them to the public land and show them spots to hunt. And and the same thing here is so here Arkansas is a state that I don't like to call it a bait state, even though that's pretty much what most of the people do. They're, I call it supplemental feeding, but baiting's legal here on private land, so you can have deer feeders, you can have it, and they run all the time, and so that's what 90% of the people here that are in these deer camps, they're setting up with a feeder and they're just feeding the deer and waiting on the deer to come in to eat, and then when you've got these kids that have grown up and that's all they've known their whole life is sitting in a stand with a bag of feed poured out, and you take them and turn them loose on public land where there's no feeding at all.
Yeah.
And now you have to hunt. You have to be a woodsman.
Yes.
At this point you have to be a woodsman, and you have to understand, the lay of the land. You have to understand feed patterns. You have to understand bedding areas. You have to understand, food sources. You have to understand all this stuff at this point in order to be successful. So you take somebody that's 25 years old and they've never hunted over anything except a pile of corn, then you take them and turn them loose on public land and say, go kill a deer.
It's a different story.
It's a different story. So, I mean, that's one of the things that if anybody comes up and goes, I want to learn how to hunt public land, I take them. I'll show them this is exactly how I do it. Or I'll, get on, base map or whatever, and I'll say, this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I'm looking for these areas right here. And I'll show them, if you're going by yourself, this is what you need to look for.
That's beautiful.
And we actually did a deal with the Arkansas Game and Fish. We, when COVID first started, we did some, we're still doing some more this summer. We did some Zoom conferences where they were basically Zoom seminars and everybody was invited. We actually did one on how to e-scout property. And I just basically got on there and laid it out. This is exactly how I e-scout public land or private land or whatever. This is how I e-scout it. And I have these spots marked before I ever walk onto the property. And when I get in there, if they look like they look on this, then, here's going to be stand 1, here's going to be stand 2, here's going to be stand 3. And I've already got these spots marked, figured out. And I don't waste a lot of time just wandering around looking, for trees to get in. So
I love it.
And I think that's what it's about. I think that to me, that's the best way that I can be a conservationist is, by sharing what I know with somebody else. And I did it for 4 years. I was with Bass Pro and before the Cabela's buyout. And so every year I did seminars at 4 or 5 different Bass Pro shops around the country. And that's what I talked about was scouting deer.
That's beautiful. It's a circle of life. And this is also a reason why I wanted to get you on this podcast, because a soulful hunter, man. A soulful hunter is somebody who is going to release it out to the world and to give back. Tim, I've really enjoyed this podcast. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I want to wrap this up a little bit and direct listeners to how to get a hold of you, because you are someone who I can already tell takes the time. Whether you know them or not, you're willing to journey with them. So if people have questions about whether it's the cowboy rodeo life, whether it's archery hunting, whether it's whatever, how do they get a hold of you?
Best way to find me is on Instagram on Tim Ensley Wild Horse. So you just type in Tim_Ensley .Wild Horse, I think, and it'll come up, and it'll be me with a cowboy hat, I think, is my profile picture. So you'll know it's me. But there's a pretty scattered, for a guy that kind of makes his living mostly in the outdoor industry, producing outdoor content, there's a pretty scattered amount of stuff on my page. So it's everything from rodeo to skateboarding to hunting. But yeah, shoot, if you've got any questions that I can help with at all, don't, shoot me a message in there. And obviously people message me about Badlands gear 24/7. I get messages about, I've been part of the Badlands crew for 10 years now. And so, yeah, so people message me about Badlands gear all the time. So
I love it. And Badlands gear is awesome gear. I've really come to love it and appreciate it. So Tim, thank you so much for being on this podcast, brother. Be blessed, be of good cheer, and good luck, and God bless you this coming hunting season. And listeners, don't forget to go check out Tim and everything that he does. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, freedom on and stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter Podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.